Hey friend, today we're sitting down with Chris and Jenni Graebe, and they're the authors of Rhythm of Home, and they've cracked the code on creating a thriving family culture and then wrote a book about it. And so we are picking their brains because this is something that is really important to Linda and I. And so we're talking about rite of passage ceremonies for kids to entrepreneurial ventures, really going in a lot of different directions on how we can set our family and our kids up for success. So if that sounds good, stay tuned, and we're about to dive in. So I want to start with a little bit of maybe Google true and false with you guys.
The old Google.
Maybe
false.
We can call
It's
this
all false. I don't know if you...
3 truths and a lie or something like that. But so I Googled both of you just to find out whatever I could find out about you. See what Google had to say. So Jenny, you have a pretty clean profile, but Chris, you have some history that I think some people need to know about. So you tell me what's incorrect here, okay?
All right.
You started a boy band?
I can neither confirm or deny that. We'll just leave that one. We'll leave that one as neutral. How about that? I might have been in one of those. Yeah.
Okay. You were a pastor?
Yep. Yes, I can confirm that. Yeah.
No longer a pastor, but we're a pastor.
I mean, a pastor at heart. It's not on a business card, but yes.
Yeah. All right.
Always at heart.
Yeah.
Angel investor. You love investing in startups.
I do that.
Correct.
Yes, do that now. Yeah.
Okay. You were on a TV show called MTV Road Rules, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Oh my gosh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
You hate tacos?
Oh, I love tacos.
Oh,
Google's wrong on that one.
That's not
a liar.
That's a lie.
It's a lie.
Okay. Well, tell me, let's just start here, but tell me more about Road Rules experience. I'm sure you've talked about this a ton, but just get us caught up to speed. What was that like?
It was the coolest thing ever. I mean, I don't know for anybody listening out there, I always tell people like, hey, if you're over or at or around 40 years old and older, like that was the show. Like Real World, Road Rules, that was it. That was like one of the OG reality. It was that and Survivor. And so as a young kid growing up watching TRL on MTV and then watching those shows, and I grew up in a small town in Indiana, so it was for me, it was the only thing that was reachable that was different than like going to college and coming back and getting a job. It was like, okay, I think if I could get on that show, it'd be one of the coolest things ever. And so, I got to go to New Zealand and Tahiti and get it paid for. I mean, it's like the ultimate. I was 22. I turned 22 the day I showed up on the show. And so like they're paying you, they're filming you, you're doing cool obstacle courses, and you're in New Zealand and Tahiti. So it was a lot of fun.
Did they paint you as the best version of yourself or the worst version of yourself, or what was that like?
So the coolest part is what I knew Jenny before I went on the show. We were just friends at the time, but 6 months before I went on the show, I had radical transformation, met Jesus, changed my life and everything. Now they had met me before that happened, and I was like party guy or whatever. And so they started like, when they called me back, I was like, hey, I don't do that anymore. I love Jesus. And they're like, cool. Like they wanted me to go on the show, completely crumble and film it on camera and show the entire world.
Yeah.
Right? So, but the other thing about reality TV, people will often say it's not real. For us, it was. I mean, the number of personality tests and profiles they put on everyone, they know who's going to fight, who's going to scream at each other, who's going to hook up with each other, all the things.
Wow.
And they show, this is the way I could say it. They have a camera on you 24 hours a day. They're going to show the world who you actually are. And that was kind of the general consensus that I met. I mean, there was a cool part where the very end we were celebrating, and at that point I was 22. I was new to my faith. I wasn't drinking or anything, and I was like, we were winning at the end. There was champagne all around. I said, hey, can you just please show that I'm pouring a Sprite into this glass? Because it's the internet, like, aha, there he is. He's an alcoholic, whatever, It was back in the day, and the executive producer had gotten the final episode months later while he was on another show, went back, watched it, and they hadn't put that in. He made him go back, put in the clip of me pouring a Sprite in the champagne glass just because he saw who I was. And so that was the coolest part. I mean, I got to share my faith on the show. I got to just, be a Christian that wasn't, because here's the thing, I was broken like those people 6 months prior. So there wasn't, I wasn't coming in thumping with the Bible. I was coming in with grace going like, I get what you're going through. And so, it was cool. It was a cool experience.
That's great.
All right.
I feel like I could talk about that for a while because I definitely watched that show.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. With my younger sister, we were all about it.
That's so funny.
Because it was reality TV and you were so like, what is this? Like, are these people for real? You just couldn't tell what was really going on. So I'm going to call her after this.
Yeah, do it. Well, it was
a big deal.
It was really the thing that hooked Jenny in the end. Just that I was a reality TV star. She's like, you're on the path to fame and fortune. We should get together because reality TV it's a great starting spot.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's it.
That's awesome.
So you guys just released your new book, Rhythm of Home. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Or congratulations. Not
So-
one.
Just one congratulations.
Congrats.
Multiple congratulations.
Thank you.
5 intentional practices for a thriving family culture. So, Chris, let's talk about this. Like how bridge from that TV show to meeting Jenny to having a family. How are all these pieces connected and connected?
So do you want me to talk about how babies are made? Is that what you're, is that what this episode's about?
That's what this is about.
Got it. Well,
Yes.
Okay. We didn't hit that in the book, but we should probably do a bonus segment on that.
bonus chapter for pre-order?
Bonus chapter.
I think
Yeah.
I know how that works.
So, okay. Well, okay.
We can move on.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on. Okay, so I go on the show and then God changes my life before I go in there and then I had never done a relationship right. And then I meet Jenny and we are both just radically transformed by Jesus in that season. It was like, okay, like this is, and it was pretty clear pretty quickly that we were supposed to be together. Now, as far as our like family history goes, I saw a lot of divorce as a kid. A lot of hard times, 4 dads, 3 moms. Jenny's parents stayed together, and so we were both observing different types of marriages and families. And I was kind of building a list of what I didn't want, and she was building a list of what she did want. And obviously through the grace of Jesus, and so I did the show, and then we ended up as local church pastors. Like, okay, we had a kid. Like we got pregnant 5 months into our marriage. Like, oh, wow. That's when we discovered how babies were made. And it was like, oh, okay. And so it was boom. We were straight out of the gate. We had a kid. And so it was like, okay, let's not do the reality TV travel on the road life. Let's be pastors and let's settle down. Let's have insurance and figure out real grown up jobs in life. And that's where I think it's just where the cultivation of like practices that we started to discover, as we grew together in the good times and the hard times, like these kind of 5 rhythms came out of that. Specifically, first focused on our marriage. That was our first book, The Rhythm of Us. And now, obviously, with 5 kids, people are like, what? Talked about that. And so here is The Rhythm of Home. So that's how we kind of, through the years, have crafted these, and through mentors and different people in our life, stumbled across these, not stumbled, just intentionally found these 5 rhythms.
Yeah. So what are the big challenges that you see that this addresses? Like when you see a family, it's like, oh man, they need help. Like what are those challenges that you're like?
I don't know if we say that.
I don't think we say that.
We don't. We're like, oh man, we're
Are you
so much.
secretly like watching families at the grocery store and being like, here, let me help you, please?
Have you ever heard of?
Absolutely not. I mean, we have 5 kids of our own. So, I mean, we definitely say over and over in the book, like we are right in the thick of this with everybody. So this is definitely not a book that is like, please come and watch us do it. It is like, join us for the journey as we learn alongside of you. And we are so grateful that God has just planted along our path, like from the start, incredible families, incredible couples that we know that they know what they're doing. And we have learned, we have just like from the beginning, we're like, okay, we are unashamedly putting ourselves at your feet. Please teach us all your wisdom. And so that is where a lot of these rhythms have come from, is actually looking at families that God has planted around us in our own community, that we can clearly see the fruit of those practices in their life, and really learning those and putting them into our family culture as intentionally as possible. And we've just benefited from being able to learn from those couples and families and practice these rhythms. And so we just wanted to share that in both the first book and then the second one with home. So no, I am never finding myself sitting back in judgment over any family, you guys know this. Parenting is so hard. So hard. So I would never, I would never judge another parent. It is so hard. We're all in this together for sure.
You know, we show up at a restaurant and people are like, you can just tell they're like, oh, great. Here they come. I came for a nice night out. They bring all these freaking kids, you know, and then inevitably, like, they walk up, your kids did such a good job. That's their way of saying, like, thanks for not ruining our night. You're like, what?
Just totally.
And then we try and slide them a payment system and hand them a book. Here you go.
So you were going to say
Well,
something?
yeah, I think that's what's great about you guys is that, I mean, although you do have, like, you told us you have one child that's 18 right now, another that's 16, but, like, your youngest is 7. And so you've kind of seen the spectrum, and also, like, you're not one kid in being like, we know exactly how to do this, because it's so fascinating. We only have 3, and I feel like it's fascinating how different they are and how differently we treat them and how we respond to them and pulls a different response out of them. And I mean, there's just so much you learn out of having more than one kid because they're all so different.
For sure. Definitely.
So yeah, I love that.
Well, the other thing that you get when you have a 7-year-old and an 18-year-old is perspective. Like you have real time. You're like, she's like, hey, do you want to play Play-Doh or dress up or like go for a walk? And 18-year-old's like, see ya, peace out.
Yes.
She's like, I'd love to play Play-Doh.
Yeah,
it would be so
definitely
great.
motivates you to say yes
Oh.
as
Yeah.
much as you can to the little
sure.
ones, because you have real time perspective that this little precious thing becomes
gone.
this huge thing overnight, you know, and they don't ask you to play pretend cookies anymore.
No, they want real cookies and they want more money too. That's what they want. Cookies and money. That's it.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, let's start talking about. I'd love to start breaking down at least a couple of these 5 keys that, like share. Yeah, for somebody who's listening, who they just feel like it's chaos, in which we have those moments.
This morning was one of them.
Where it's just like,
We
man,
get it. Totally get it.
we need help in this area. How do we create our family situation where it just feels where we can just invite the peace of Jesus into it, and we just want a little bit more chill.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, just start breaking something down. Help somebody listening who feels like that.
Sure. Well, first, I just want to say we have all been there. Like, there is not a parent alive who has not had those days, those weeks, those seasons. It's just part of it. It's going to be. And so I think there's freedom in knowing that, and like just hearing another parent say, we've been there. Like, this is normal.
So
You are
true.
not, you don't have the one household where there's chaotic days. It is just par for the course. Like, congratulations, you're a parent. You will live through all different kinds of days. Just know that. So I think I love hearing that. I'm always grateful to have, you know, another parent reach out to me and say, like, hey, you're going to get through this. Like, this is a season. So I would start with that. And then I would, definitely say these 5 rhythms. I think what's great about this and what they have been helpful for us is just having something that can keep us on the same page and headed the same direction together. Like sitting down with each other to say, okay, what are the top things that we can set in place in our family that are the most important thing to us? When our kids grow up and leave our house, we're about to launch that first one. When we do that, when we launch them out into the world, what do we hope that they will look back on our family life and remember about our time together? What are those rhythms that we hope to practice together as a family that will help us become the kind of family we want to become, close to each other, and that will make them grateful for their time here in our home? And so these are the 5 rhythms that we landed on. I think it would be different for each family based on where you are, the season of life you're in, with the kids that you have, and the set of circumstances, for sure. But I think a good place to start for most families that we sit down with, most couples that we sit with, I think the first one, the rhythm of speaking life. I always start with that one, I think especially for couples, because usually that is just the foundational place to start. If you can change the way you're speaking towards each other as a couple, and then especially as a couple in front of your kids and towards your kids, it literally shifts the whole culture of your family and of your marriage. If you just start to notice the way that you talk to each other, are you choosing to speak words of life instead of words of death? I mean, the Bible says there's power in the tongue. Choose life or choose death. And we literally have been given that power to create life in our family just by the words that we speak over each other. So I always think that's such a great place to start. Just start noticing, okay, what are the words that I'm speaking out loud? And you might be surprised if you start taking that inventory at what's actually coming out of your mouth, and if it's what you would choose and what you would hope to speak over your kids and over your spouse.
Yeah, that's so good. I'd love to hear, because I feel like, just being honest, Linda tells me I'm a good dad. I do my best to be a good dad, but I don't know if there's any area in my life where I feel more like a failure more often than as a dad. Just because it's like I have this maybe ideal in my mind of what I could be if I never got frustrated, if I was never selfish, if I was never whatever, any of these things.
Yeah.
Pretty much. If we were Jesus.
Yeah.
And so
it'd fix everything, wouldn't it?
And it might be the way I'm wired too, but I just often feel like, man, I could have done it better. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of this, I think this is such a powerful idea. I love this idea of speaking life. It reminds me of that one verse. I don't remember what it is again, but calling things that be not as though they are. And really, and this might not be exactly what you're talking about, but I think this is part of it, like confessing things over, your kids, your spouse, of what you want them to believe, like what the Bible says about them,
Sure.
And so my question, I guess, is like, what practically have you guys done to grow in that area? And possibly specifically like to break away from basically speaking negativity and anything that you don't want to come out of your mouth. Like, how have you shifted that? And I know you mentioned like kind of paying attention, but anything beyond that you found helpful?
Yeah, I'll share something and then you jump into
You're going to find on this podcast that she's the smartest person in this room. And I tell the funny stories in the book, but no, she's so good. Please go, babe. Go.
No, I would say this rhythm in particular, I have learned from him for sure over the years. When we first got married, he was so good at doing this. Like, he's just a words of affirmation kind of guy. Like, he's just always encouraging. Like, I mean, he will encourage strangers on the street, like, great job parallel parking, way to go. Like, I mean, he just comes out of his mouth without him even thinking about it. And I just I didn't do that. It wasn't a habit for me. I didn't grow up in a family that practiced this, so I did not know how to do it. And it wasn't that I wasn't thinking nice things, I just wasn't saying them out loud. But I realized over time in our marriage, I mean, he finally had to be like, I need you to say good things about me. Like, I need you to tell me I'm awesome. Like, I mean,
I keep telling myself, but I'd appreciate if somebody else would share.
I'm going to need you to start doing this. And he was right. Like, I just, and it wasn't that I didn't think great things. I just wasn't saying them out loud. It was really hard for me to get in the habit of doing it because it felt so awkward because I just didn't see it modeled in our family. It just wasn't the culture I grew up in. And we loved each other. I grew up in a wonderful family. We just didn't really practice that. We didn't affirm each other audibly. We would do nice things for each other, serve each other, other things. But this was not one that I knew how to do. And so I just had to start small. Like, and we say this in the book, like, maybe if it's hard to say it out loud, write them a note. Leave them we can, send them a text or leave them a little note on their mirror or something. Like, start small, but really it's so simple. When you think something nice, just say it out loud. Just take a minute to say it out loud or write it down and leave it for them to find. And then over time, you really do grow in this skill the more that you practice it. And it's become something really huge in our family. We've tried to make intentional times where we do this. So every birthday before presents, we have praise before presents. So we go around and we just each take a turn just saying something we love about that kid for that moment.
I love that.
It's on page 70 for anybody who's reading the book. I got it pulled up right here.
Good.
Cool.
Yeah. So I think just things like that, we try to intentionally plan for it, but then also try to cultivate eyes to see when there's a random moment where you can speak life into that kid or into your spouse.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's something we've learned over the years.
Yeah, I think one of the things we discovered, we were doing like a retreat, and we had kind of we were hitting this. There was a lot of tears in the room. Like we're like, hey, couples, kind of go off. This is a marriage retreat, and go off and like talk about this with each other, speaking life. And one of the questions we asked in the follow up was, how many of you saw your parents speaking life about each other in front of you as a child? And I would say, I think it was 97% of the room, literally not joking, not exaggerating the number, did not see that modeled to them as a kid. So one of the ways we do is I'm just going to like, girls, she'll walk in the room and go, do you know how beautiful your mom is? Your mom is gorgeous. Or like, girls, your mom, we just launched a book. Can you believe? Like she's an author. You know, just trying to like, and it's not fake, but it's like championing my girl, my bride in front of my kids, ultimately throwing seeds that I believe will produce a harvest in their own life. And they will find someone who will speak that way, and that it won't be hard to be because they've seen it. They've seen dad gush over mom or mom gush over dad. And then it spills over into them. At least that's the goal.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's something that I do feel like we started really strong with that in our marriage, and I feel like we've maintained that pretty well, which we've had to fight for. But that's something, I mean, similar to you, Chris, like I'm like, Linda, tell me how good I am more often. Like,
she's like, can you do the dishes? I'll tell you how good you are when you do the dishes. Please.
And she's really good at it, but there's no limit on how much I can take of,
Have I told you guys
words
how
of
awesome
affirmation.
Bob
Yeah,
is?
go. No, please.
He's amazing.
I know. Isn't he?
Good job.
So anyway, so yeah, that I think, we've been able to continue that, which you guys have probably seen this too. I feel like it's easy when you're newlywed, but then real life starts hitting, a couple years go by, you get kids, you get busy and blah, 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 blah. And I think it's so easy to drift into what I think is the worst of this, when you get further down the line to where all you're doing is criticizing your spouse. You're making fun of them to your friends. And like that, and it's like, that can't be good for marriage.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, that's really where this came from, was as a kid growing, I tell this story in the first book, but we would go for trips as a family with like 4 other families. And I was always kind of like one of the older kids, and so I didn't want to hang out with the younger kids because that wasn't cool. So I would sit right in the middle where I could scoot as close to the adults as possible to listen in on their conversation instead of the little kid conversation. And I have this vivid memory of listening in on the adult conversations and watching the couples make fun of each other, make fun of their spouse. I mean, it was like every night you could set your clock to it. As the meal would wind down, you just start to hear the stories like, listen to what this guy did last week, such an idiot, just telling whatever stories. But I remember as a kid watching like the other spouses, who was being used as the butt of a joke, like you could just watch their face drop. And it really wasn't funny. And it felt like, oh, okay. And I remember making a mental note as a kid, like, don't do that to your spouse. And there was even a couple there who didn't do it. There was one couple every night that they just wouldn't do it. And I remember them sticking out to me as a couple that just clearly loved each other. And the only stories that they offered up about the other just really showed how much they really adored each other. And so when Chris and I got engaged, we actually called them and we went and visited them. They were pastors in Birmingham. And we got to spend a weekend with them. And they taught us this very rhythm that I remembered as a kid, which was, you don't throw your spouse under the bus. You speak life over them. That is your job as their spouse, to lift them up with your words, not tear them down, even if it's funny. Like it's not worth it. It's never worth it.
I remember reading this study that about marriages, and they were trying to identify what are the happiest couples. And so they looked at all these marriages and they analyzed the beliefs that one spouse had over another in the most happy marriages. And what they found was that the couples that had been married the longest happily and all this stuff, like the couples that were modeling after, were shooting for, they all had what they called almost a, what was it? I forgot how it was worded, but basically almost like a naive belief of how good their spouse was. So it was almost like they intentionally believed the best about their spouse, like better than they actually were. Yeah. And it was such an interesting thing, because I remember thinking, well, it's like, well, what if the spouse isn't actually that good? And it's like, and the point that was being made was, still
it doesn't
believe
matter.
the best in them, because it's only going to benefit you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I remember, like, this is probably 10 years ago, and I've just been impacted by that, because I think this all ties together, because the enemy is, obviously, he wants to destroy our marriages. So he's going to be working overtime to identify all the problem spots in our spouses or in our kids or whatever else. Yeah. And so it's like we have to counteract that with, again, I think believing the best, seeing them after the Spirit more than, what their flesh did in a moment of weakness, and not identifying them by that, Yeah. So yeah, that's really, I love that. On page 74.
Oh, 74.
74.
Yeah.
This is the one. Okay, so you were talking about marking the moment with words. Do you remember that little subheading you have on here? Do you know what this is about?
Marking the moment.
We've written books. I remember what it's like to forget things. Do I need to give you
Tell
more?
us more. I just want to make sure it's exactly the way it's supposed to be.
Can you read the whole thing to me, actually? That would be great.
I mean, we have
I
I guess we have a book right here.
We can look at it.
We can all look back, remember the words that were spoken over us that left a mark in some way, words that begin to draw something out of us or open a new pathway before us, words that have power. One of the most meaningful ways we've found to practice this rhythm of speaking life involves a rite of passage party when our kids turn 13.
Oh.
Will you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, we sit them out in the woods and say,
Here's a
survive.
knife.
Yeah.
Go for it.
The girls, it gets interesting with the girls for sure.
Yeah.
But
We do
don't
not
discriminate
do that.
around
Don't
here.
email us.
Oh.
No, we do not.
Email Jenny at. Yeah, no, I mean, it was something we were big Eldridge fans, John and Stacey Eldridge, and they had talked about different things like this throughout. I was like, okay, what is this going to look like for us? And so, we kind of landed on 13-ish is when it happens, and we kind of do a dual thing. We'll do a getaway, like so dad with son and mom with daughter, just talk about all kinds of things, kind of like, hey, let's talk about how babies are made and even whatever else that comes alongside of that whole world, and so but then just like, hey, you're stepping in a new season. We start to kind of deliver this mantle, this idea that like, hey, you're no longer a kid anymore. And so there's responsibilities and opportunities for you, and like we believe in you and all those things. And then we have a gathering where we will bring mentors, coaches, maybe a couple close friends from our kids in their life, and then we will just speak life and blessing over them, get grandparents involved. Like there's a grandfather, he'll be there, grandmother, or whatever. And so, sometimes you go like, I don't know if they heard anything, but they're 13 years old, but as I'm over there bawling, and all the parents are like, "This is the."
It's all
I'm like,
powerful.
It's a whole thing. But going back to seeds, is that we're just throwing seeds that we just truly believe are going to produce a harvest, and
something we do is we ask each person that comes to just pick one thing that they know to be true, or like a potential, like you were saying, like what do you see in them? What do you see growing in them that you could speak to specifically as they're entering this, journey to adulthood? What could they grab onto from people that know them and love them? Like, here's who you are. Remember that as you're going through all these changes, And so it's really neat. I mean, we've had 2 go through it so far, but I love hearing the words that people choose to speak over our kids. And it's neat that there's so far, but for both, there's been themes. For our daughter, everyone chose something with light. It was like star or bright or shine. It was like, that's what you do. That's a part of how God's made you. Like, that's something he planted in you. How cool that all these people, all these different people who didn't talk to each other about it, they noticed that about you. That is something clearly God's planted in you. And how can we grow that, as you're growing? How can we water that. So it's just a really neat experience.
Yeah, I love that.
That's really cool.
No, I think John Tyson wrote about something similar in The Intentional Father, which like it's on our to-do list. We have a 10-year-old now, but it's
so
like
we got 3 years to get
So you
it
got
together.
a couple years, yeah.
let's start planning this. Yeah, I'd love to hear, like, talking about a little bit of the financial side of things. I'd love to hear how some of these rhythms have affected maybe your family finances in a positive way. And this might require a little bit of thought, but maybe you have something off the cuff. But like, I'm curious how it's affected your financial life, and maybe that's with the kids, maybe with you guys. Like, yeah, any thoughts there?
Well, I think, one of the things that it depends on, like Jenny said off the jump, it all depends on the season that you're in and how these different rhythms could apply to your life. And one of the rhythms, my favorite rhythm, is the rhythm of adventure, seeking adventure. So it's this idea that, like, I'm a 7 Enneagram, love the party, want to go have all kinds of fun, and so I think as long as, and like you said, getting stuck in a rut and kind of running, you can kind of just get in this mundane, get in the mundane, and I love adventure. And so the coolest thing is like, it helps you if you're like, okay, what kind of adventures do we want to take? So like in a week, we're taking our entire family to Lake Tahoe. It's one of the places that we as a couple love to adventure, but like, let's go take our kids on adventure. Well, to do something like that, you need to definitely plan ahead. Like, we sat down from our finance, I think it was like February or January, like, you want your kids to go to camps in the summer, you want to go on vacations, you want to do this stuff. Like, I was like, let's just put all these numbers together here, because these could get pretty spicy pretty quick. And then you start to go like, okay, well, maybe this kid won't go to that camp, but they could do this thing over here and do this little day camp while they're here. And so you start to prioritize. Like, we didn't leave adventure off the table. We just got strategic with adventure when it came to our budgeting, especially when our son is 18. I was like, we really want to take a big trip, but it's like, okay, now I have all these airline points, so we can all fly to Tahoe because we've got airline points. So like, okay, that helps. And so from a budgeting perspective, and even all of them, the rhythm of slowing down, like, you want to slow down. There's a way you can slow down, and it doesn't have to necessarily mean booking 5 days at an all-inclusive resort. It's like just finding a way to be close and quiet and go on a hike and do it around here. So I think depending on the rhythm that you're working on, there's, especially speaking life, I mean, that costs you time and energy, but some of these other ones you can practice without it having to take a massive toll on your budget. But I think if you want to incorporate them, you can sit down and say, okay, what does adventure look like for us? And in what reality can we facilitate this adventure with the current constraints and finances that we have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you guys done anything in terms of teaching your kids about money that you have found to be helpful? So you have an 18-year-old now, so it's like, I don't know, is anything
I think
stuck?
It's every kid. Does it suck? Is that what you said?
No, anything stuck.
Suck?
Any lessons?
Yeah, I mean,
Has anything
well,
stuck?
it goes back to like the personality of the kid. Every kid's so different. Our son, and this is the interesting thing, and I don't know if this dynamic plays out for you guys, is like, we talked about it the other day, like, we were pastors for a long time and made no money. It was like there was none. It was like, and Jenny was the queen of like thrifting, and she was just very creative. She wanted those shoes for the kids. She's going to find a way. I may come home and we don't have a dresser because she sold it, or she says, "Come home because I sold the dresser. I'm not going to meet this weirdo at the door." Yeah. So like, it's like, well, what are we going to do with our clothes? I don't know, but I want to get that thing over there. And so like, we were just very strategic. And I think for our older kids, especially our son, who saw that, like, he started to develop in him, and I think he's wired this way naturally. Yeah. I'm going to go figure it out. He's not necessarily, it takes a lot for him to ask. So he's like, I'll go, like, he goes and knocks on doors and does door-to-door sales and literally power washes people's driveways. Like
That's
last
great.
week.
Yeah. He paid for half of his senior mission trip just by doing that. Just going, he raised like $2,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, just that spirit of like entrepreneurship is big in our family. Obviously he's entrepreneurial, and so our kids have learned it from him. But yeah, I think that's something that most of them are pretty motivated to get out there and find something to sell.
Yeah, I mean, our daughter who's 16 has sold cupcakes before. You know, they'll set up lemonade stands out front of the house and do things like that. And so like we're not. I mean, especially, you know, we live in the same area, and people probably even around the country that listening to this will feel it. Like, you know, sometimes you can be like, wow, what car did your friend get for their 16th birthday? Wow, that's cool. Well, you're not getting that. So, and it's like, oh, you mean your friend, you know, didn't pay a dime for the mission trip? Their parents just stroked a multi-$1,000 check for them. Mm-hmm. They didn't feel it. In no way did that kid feel it. And so for us, you know, it's an ever, you know, growing journey and adventure for us, especially depending on the kid. But we don't just hand things over. It's just it's not how we roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I have a friend who also has 5 kids, but she lives in Franklin, Tennessee with us, and she has said, I welcome hardship for my kids because we live in such a bubble. It feels like sometimes where it's like everything can kind of go your way if, you know, because we live in a prosperous nation and, you know, everything else. And even just in the town where it's kind of like everything feels really safe and, you know, all that. Yeah. But she like presses in whenever she sees her kids going through something difficult because she's like, I want them to understand. And I think that's a perfect example of like, you're going on a mission trip. Great. How are you going to pay for it? And forcing them to kind of come up with their own ideas. Because at some point, like these kids are going to leave the house. And we want them to be able to leave the house and not be like, I don't know how to cope with anything.
Yes.
Paying for things or anything else, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I've been reading this book. It's really interesting. It's called The Value Creation Kid. Have you heard of this book?
No.
It's really, really good. I'm still right in the middle of it, but the whole idea is if you can help your kids understand that it's not about chores, it's not about these lists, it's about creating value, because we ultimately get paid on the value that we provide in our entire life. Any job you do, the percentage of compensation you get is tied to the perceived value that you bring. And so the idea that he's sharing, and this is something I'm still chewing on, is helping kids understand, like, look, there's gigs or opportunities around the house. Like, this is what we do as a family, but here's opportunities to provide value. And it sounds like it's doing some pretty cool. So this is a whole other layer that I'm kind of diving into and trying to understand because it's true. I never understood that the dollars that I receive from an income and job all comes down to the value that I'm perceived that I'm providing for whoever's on the other side. And so that took me a long time to get to that. So I think if our kids can understand on the front end, like they'll be doing all kinds of things to bring in money, and we don't even have to worry about it from that point.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory.
Yeah. Elon Musk, controversial character. He had a quote that I really liked along these lines. He said, "You're paid in direct proportion to the size of the problem that you solve."
Yeah.
And again, like if I look back on my life, I look at all my jobs, I look at everything else. It's like, you know, when I was getting paid $12 an hour, I was solving a $12 an hour problem, you know?
Right.
And then once we were able to solve larger problems, more significant problems, and I don't think it's always, I think there are people who are solving significant problems who unfortunately aren't being compensated that way. But I think in general, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And
well, there's a lot of potential, I think, for people to like take that feedback and learn. Like, how can I solve bigger problems? How can I do this better than other people? You know? Yeah.
Well, this is great. I want to take a hard left turn, and Chris, I want to hear about the crowd. Will you explain that? I think a lot of our audience would like to hear
I think
about
it'd be fun to have Jenni explain it.
I was just going to say, I cannot explain it, so I'm
great.
So glad
Let's let her take a stab.
No, go for it.
Oh, it's so funny. Well, as an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, I've started a bunch of businesses. Doesn't mean they've all been successful, but I've had some that have done pretty good. Like, I'm excited about the idea with some new legislation that opened up in 2016. It made it possible for anyone to invest in early stage startup companies. Typically, before 2016, the Jobs Act, it was only reserved for the ultra rich and wealthy, like accredited investors. So basically the doors opened up where now you can invest. This isn't crowdfunding like you get like a widget that someone's making, and this is like you own shares in the company. Like, great example, one of the companies I own is a 30-year, this is different than a startup, but it's like a 30-year-old company. It's called Cookie Dough Bites. You can go to Walgreens or the movie theater right now, and every time I go to the movie, I'm like, I own a piece of that company. It's a private company. I hold shares in it. They're going to continue to scale, and hopefully one day they'll exit. I own shares of a company that was featured on Shark Tank, and they're absolutely crushing it. And I invested in them back in 2020. So basically what I do is try and help everyday investors understand that this legislation opened 8 years ago. It's still so new, and that they can sometimes invest in startups for as little as $100. And now I don't recommend that as a strategy because, you know, even if they did 100x, it's not going to give you the returns you want. But like, I just love that this is another way for the people to invest in startups. It's a diversification play. It's something different than crypto. You're betting on American businesses. Usually they're all American based businesses. And that's just like, it's like literally the American way. Like, I don't know. I love it.
Yeah. So are you curating this list?
So what I do is on the crowd, I have a watch list every single week of like, so right now there's probably close to 500 startups that are raising right now. They want literally you, I, all of us, as long as we're over 18 years old, can go and invest in these 500 plus startups. And so I'm just constantly looking around, trying to find ones that catch my attention, get my eye. And then weekly in our newsletter, I'll share one that I've got my eye on that I'm watching, kind of add to the list. And then I have like a membership of people, if they want to come alongside me and see the companies that I'm investing in, then they can follow me there. But that's more of like a next level opportunity there. And so, you know, when I find a company that I invest in, like I'm paying thousands of dollars for analysts to do reports, and I fly to these startups, I shoot videos at these startups, and I deliver everything to my members right before the deal goes live, and they can invest, and then I invest alongside them. It's a lot of fun.
So do you have are you familiar with Masterworks?
Yes.
Yeah. So is it similar to that in that it's a platform, you just go on and do it, or is every deal a different avenue to get involved in?
There's a lot of different platforms that are out there that someone could go find deals on. And I would say I'm platform agnostic. Like, I don't care where the deal is housed, because they're just a vehicle that basically puts the deal up, and they follow the FINRA regulations, SEC guidelines, and they're the middleman that basically can process payment and house the deal. But for me, like, I'm just an independent guy who's out there, loves the space, and have created this community of people who are like, hey, I'm interested in this. And for me, I look up and go, this is a long game. You know, the typical average time frame for an exit is 7 years. And so this is not crypto turnaround. This is not day trading. This is not, I like the longevity of it. But I believe we're all going to hear stories in the next 2, 3, 4 years of like people who put in 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, and that turned into 50 grand, 100 grand, $400,000. These crazy stories we hear of the Peter Thiels investing in Facebook and all these other like uber wealthy people that took 100 grand and turned it into, you know, $52 million, like something like that. I believe the day is going to come when like your neighbor who's quietly doing this on the side comes out because they're afraid that people are going to think they're kind of crazy. And then when they get the big exit, they'll go, okay, I'm not crazy. I got to go tell everybody. So I think that's, there's a moment coming. I'm here for all of it.
That's great. That's cool. All right. So then 2 different things. Where can they find the crowd? What's the URL?
The crowd is basically the word crowd without the O. So crwd.co, thecrowd.co.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And then the book, Rhythm of Home. The other one's The Rhythm of Us. This is out now, right? We're out of pre-order stage, which is great.
We are.
And so I'm about halfway through the book. I haven't made it all the way through yet, but I'm getting a lot of great ideas from it.
Same.
I think you guys, I'm glad you wrote the book because I think it's something that's needed. And this is how we like to teach too, just sharing what we've done that's worked for us, not like the one size fits all final answer. It's just, this has worked for us if it works for you. And I just feel like you guys do that really, really well with this. So
thank you.
Good job. Kudos on the book. Chris, especially you. You did a great job on this book, brother.
Well, tell me more. Tell me more. Keep going.
Keep it going.
If I had a bestsellers list, I would put you on the top.
Let's
If
just
I
make
work
one.
at the New
Let's
York
just
Times,
do
I'd
it.
put you on it.
Let's just do it. Let's get there. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Well, anyway,
thank you.
Great talking to you guys. Thank you for coming on to share. And yeah, look forward to chatting again.
Absolutely.
Sounds
Appreciate
good.
it.
Thank you.
I just learned about you last week. I purchased your book and read it in just a few days, and I've since ordered 5 more to give to others. This is what Jason and Megan said after reading our book.
That's awesome. Way to go, Jason and Megan. We love that. And if you've enjoyed our book, you are welcome to do that and order 5 more for others as well. I would love to see that.
You can get it on Amazon, but we so believe that the church needs this message that if you can cover shipping, we'd love to cover the cost of the book and send you a free copy.
All you need to do is go to seedtime.com/free to get yours.